Hello and welcome back to the Psychology of Your 20s, the podcast where we talk through some of the big life changes and transitions of our 20s and what they mean for our psychology. Hello everybody, welcome back to the show, welcome back to the podcast, new listeners, old listeners, thanks for tuning in. It's so great to have you back. What does the experience indicate about our growth and our journey? Why do we tend to panic as we enter the tail end of our 20s? And finally, perhaps the most important element of this episode is how do we use this experience as a springboard for our growth and self-actualization and greater happiness. So much amazing content to cover, so much learning to come, I hope. So buckle in for this week's deep dive into the quarter life crisis. Okay, so we need to start from square one and get our basics down pat. What is a quarter life crisis? When we talk about a quarter life crisis, we're thinking primarily about that period in our lives when we hit our 20s. For most of us, it's at this stage that we really start looking at our lives and probably thinking we have a good 80 or so years on this planet. We are a quarter of the way through that, hence the word quarter. And the reality of the finality of life can really just hit us square up. That here we are at 23, 24, 25 years of age, whatever age we're at. We are a quarter of a way through our lives. And what do we have to show for that? What are we even doing? Firstly, something to get straight. This experience is absolutely normal. And I think I would be more concerned if someone didn't have this experience, because it's a pivotal moment of redirection, of clarity and growth that is essential for our development. A quarter life crisis, it's not a clinical term. You're not going to find it in the DSM or get a diagnosis. It's actually a very subjective, highly individual, kind of existential crisis of sorts that is often seen in people in a certain phase of life who've started asking themselves some pretty big questions that they've never asked themselves before. And this results in some really deep and scary soul searching around some of those critical components of our life, our careers, our relationships, our financial situation, our ambitions. Massive things to tackle all at one time. And if you're finding yourself in this period of stress, of doubt, of anxiety, kind of wanting to burrow down or run away, you're certainly not alone. I found this LinkedIn study, I think it was done last year or maybe the year before, but it found that 72% of the young people they surveyed had experienced some form of a quarter life crisis, with 33% of them currently kind of in the throes of said quarter life crisis. It's such a common experience, 72%. And the average age of this crisis is about 26 to 27, and it lasts about 11 months, but it can happen at any age, at any time around this period. This estimation figure of 26 to 27, though, it makes sense, doesn't it? It's at this age that our 30s are looming, the next major chapter of adulthood. We feel like we have enough life experience to be an adult, but don't exactly feel that way. Sometimes we find ourselves starting completely from scratch, ending long-term relationships with people we thought we would marry, suddenly finding ourselves really dissatisfied with our professional lives, wishing we'd made a different choice, and just feeling all around super lost. And whilst that internal struggle is happening, what's going on around us. We're seeing people that we know slowly get married, have children, live their passion, get promoted, and seem like they have everything together, whilst we, at least from personal experience, are still making mistakes, and that can really exacerbate already those internal feelings of dissatisfaction. I had this experience the other day actually, whereby most of my friends have these lovely partners, the people they've essentially decided to spend their lives with, and I'm still here with my bad date stories, another failed talking stage or terrible but funny hookup story, making the same mistakes, doing the same thing that I've done since I was 18 or 19, whilst everyone around me seems to have grown up, seems to have gotten everything together. I think another thing to consider is that our 20s are this weird vacuum between our teenage years and what we see as proper adulthood, our 30s and our 40s. And there are all of these opposing kind of decisions and opposites to consider. We have these societal expectations that we should be getting settled, we should settle down, but our brains are still developing and we're still exploring what we would like to be. We feel like we need to have a grasp over things like our finances and our careers, but at the same time, we're seeing all of these other things around us change. We're having all of these deep conversations and questions of ourselves, and externally in the real world, there's massive inflation, there's unemployment, climate change, unaffordable housing, lower incomes, compared to the expectations that were set by the generation before us, by our parents. Those expectations of having it together, of having a house, of knowing what you want to do with your life, they're no longer realistic. I've been having this conversation and this discussion with my friends more and more, where our childhood visions of our lives are just no longer realistic. It's just not happening. We're not going to be millionaires anytime soon, at least. We start to abandon some of our big aspirations, and it can be a massive trigger for what will become a quarter-life crisis. Sometimes where we are right now isn't where we want to be. It's not where we imagined we would be at this age. We thought things would turn out differently, and they're not. When I was 15, 16, I thought I was going to be really successful by now, really successful, maybe even married, or at least with someone I love. I thought I'd be a homeowner. Definitely thought I'd be making more money, maybe traveling, and I thought that I would know what I wanted to do with my life. And in some ways that's true, right? I get to make this podcast. That's what I want to do in my life, right? I really enjoy doing this, but everything is still quite confusing, and there are all these different thoughts and feelings floating around in my head. I wanted this incredible life for myself of jet setting and maybe writing a novel or going to Europe with my soulmate. That's a bit ridiculous to me now that I'm in my mid-20s. But that's just how life turns out. Don't get me wrong here. Please don't misconstrue my words. I absolutely love my life, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I love my life. I've had these incredible experiences and growth these past years, and those periods were, so much more than I could have imagined as a child. But as the years go by, and I kind of find myself lapsing into stagnation and feeling comfortable in what I have, I realize I haven't achieved some of those dreams, and I panic a little bit more. I worry if I'm doing this right. It's such a quintessential experience of our 20s to be questioning our path forward and our path to this point, right? And then there's that existential knowledge that lingers, that we're so aware of in our 20s as we gain more self-awareness and more appreciation of the world, that this is, our only shot. You don't get another shot at life. And here we are, a quarter of the way through, and, I really better make that count. And I'd better be sure of my decisions. It's so much pressure. It can be quite stifling to come across that realization. And that's a really common train or pattern of thought for those of us who are going through a quarter-life crisis right now. It's a pattern of thought that many psychologists or therapists tend to hear. They tend to get these visits from people in their 20s who all of a sudden wake up one day with that realization that the decisions they make count, and they start questioning the ones that they've made. Meaning and purpose, the purpose of our life, of our existence. The realities of death, just some fun casual topics. And obviously, the answer to these questions is not easy to come by. We don't really have the answer to them. And they require a lot of deep contemplative thinking about our values, what brings us joy, the impact we want to have on the world, many of which are questions that are shared between a quarter-life crisis and an existential crisis. And it's almost a rite of passage, right? That we all go through this in our 20s in order to exit out onto the other side of real adulthood. I don't know, maybe not real adulthood, but some more mature kind of adulthood, where we feel like we have our lives together. At the center of a quarter-life crisis is really a struggle for meaning. Meaning in life, the meaning of life, is impossible to define. It's really difficult because it's a highly personal decision. It's a highly personal experience. But researchers, they've kind of defined it as the feeling that our lives are significant, that they're purposeful, that they're coherent. In other words, that we have a direction that makes sense to us and gives us a feeling of worth. And when we're in our 20s, we're so young to have figured that out because we've really only just come into our mature selves. And the struggle for a purpose, for a meaningful job, the need to make that contribution, it can be paralyzing. And when we can't make sense of that, and we can't make sense of the understanding that this is a normal experience, the typical symptoms and experiences and reactions of dread and stress and anxiety and meltdown, feeling unfulfilled, they follow along pretty quickly after that. The need for purpose, I think, is one of the defining characteristics of human beings. We crave purpose. We really do. And we suffer some pretty serious psychological difficulties when we don't have it. Purpose is like a fundamental component of living and of living a fulfilling life. And it's so important that it's even measured on most tests of well-being and most ways of assessing our mental health. They'll ask you, do you feel like you have purpose? There are a number of psychological explanations for why it's so important, but the one that I find perhaps the most fascinating was featured in Psychology Today, which is this online site. And I stumbled across it when I was researching this episode, and it made so much sense to me. It made so much sense. When we feel like we have direction or something to work towards, this makes us less vulnerable to something called psychological discord. And that is this recognizable sense of unease we get when our attention isn't occupied by external things. And when we don't have something that drives us, it results in boredom. And following on from that, also anxiety and depression and a crisis. By having a purpose and an intentional purpose, something we actually really I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because I've been on a bit of a health journey. I wanted to take better care of my immune system and my gut health. And with one delicious scoop of AG1, you're essentially absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, probiotics, all that good stuff. And it's really great for your nervous system and your immune system. It's just one simple micro habit that you can incorporate into your daily life with big benefits. It's super lifestyle friendly, and Athletic Greens is also a climate neutral certified company, which we absolutely love on the show. Right now, it is time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system.